You've walked all day through mud, mist, and questionable cheese. Your feet are blistered, your soul is hopeful, and the sign of the scallop shell finally swings above a wooden door. Welcome to the Pilgrim night, where the beds are shared, the prayers are long, and the miracles are negotiable. And welcome to History Lullaby, where we tuck strange, sleepy corners of the past under your blanket. If you're new here, settle and subscribe, ring the bell, and let the candle burn low while we wander. Step in, out of the damp. The door sighs like an old monk. Warm air, thick with broth and smoke, presses your face. A brother, or a sharp-eyed sister with flour on her sleeves, looks you over the way a stable hand judges a mule, kindly but clinically. Staff, cloak, pouch, shell on the hat, dust on the hem. You pass. A wooden ladle finds your hands. A blessing touches your brow. Somewhere to sit finds your bones. Tonight, we'll live one medieval night on the Camino, from dusk to dawn inside a hospitalia, the roadside hostel of a world that measures distance in prayers. We'll watch staves lean like a little forest by the door, cloaks steam by the hearth, and boots exhale as laces finally surrender. We'll trade day-long silence for stew-side talk, compare scallop shells and crumpled badges, and meet the enthusiast who swears his flask holds water from 3 holy wells and at least 1 puddle touched by St. James twice. We'll slip into the dormitory where palates smell of wool, wine, and damp courage. Say night prayers that outnumber the fleas by a small but meaningful margin, and weigh thieves on the road against saints in the mind. Around midnight, we'll negotiate with blisters, bargain for dreams, and decide which hurts more, your feet, your pride, or that cheese. Then, with the bell and the first blue edge of morning, we'll lace up with stiff fingers, shoulder the road again, and learn why, despite mud and fear, people kept walking. It's a slow, candle-lit pace-part lullaby, part living history, with a wink where the darkness gets too serious. If sleep finds you, good pilgrims are allowed to doze. If not, let the rhythm do the walking. Thump of staff, hush of prayer, the soft thunder of a dormitory trying very hard to be holy. The door is lower than you expect, so the first thing the Pilgrim Road teaches you tonight is humility bow, or crack your skull. Your staff taps twice on the sill, then clatters against a pile of its cousins, a little forest of wood just inside the threshold, all leaning at pilgrim angles. Warm air rolls over your face. It smells like broth, damp wool, smoke, and relief. Beyond it, a shuffle of sandals, a low murmur layered like psalm tones, a copper pot hissing to itself about patience. A hospitaller stands in the doorway, a brother in patched brown, or a sister with flour dusted up her sleeves like holy snow. Their eyes do a quick audit. Cloak, pack, scallop shell, mud at the hem, the angle of your exhaustion. Not harsh, just practiced. They've seen every kind of tiredness. A palm lifts in blessing. You feel it without quite hearing the Latin. And their other hand presses the weathered edge of a wooden ladle into your fingers as if to say, "Welcome, now breathe." The door sighs shut behind you. The clatter of staves takes on a cozy echo inside the hall. Long benches shoulder up to a table slick with years of elbows. Boots steam by the hearth. A rope of onions swings lazily in the heat. Someone snores already head-tipped back against a post. Someone else is muttering a prayer that sounds suspiciously like an argument with their feet. You stand there swaddled in the innermost layer of road grime, and suddenly the world is smaller, kinder, nearer. "Name," says the hospitaller, with a tone that is checked in half of Christendom. You give it, along with the town that seems impossibly far away now. They ask for your direction, always the same, toward the west, toward the saint, toward the idea of being made less heavy. They ask gently what vow keeps you walking. A penitent's promise, a merchant's gratitude, a mother's desperate bargain for a child's fever. You speak yours into the dim room. It joins the others, weighted with mud, bravado, and hope. This is the credential of the age, the pre-modern check-in, name, origin, intention, stamped not with ink, but with listening. A wooden slate records it, or a parchment kept by the door, guarded by a string and good memories. The brother scratches your details with a patient stylus. The sister looks you over like a physician with a theological license. Then comes the second audit. Feet. You don't mean to perform a miracle, but when you peel off your boot, you change water into soup. The hospitaler's mouth does not move, but their eyebrows pray. They usher you to a bench near a low brazier where a basin waits, steaming faintly under a folded cloth. You sit, and the bench creaks in the international language of wood that has held too many stories. The warm water takes your foot like a friend takes your hand, without judgment, with heat. A second basin appears for the other foot, and you are suddenly, unaccountably, close to tears. The foot inspection is both medical and liturgical. They have a way of handling a torn blister that feels like absolution, and a way of nodding at your blackened toenail that suggests it will be canonized as a minor relic if it falls off tonight. Vinegar touches skin. A thread of honey seals a cracked heel. A scrap of wool becomes a talisman. The brother hums something old. The sister says, "Rest." Between them, they make a sacrament of first aid. Behind you, arrivals keep shuffling through the door, each with the same choreography. Staff to the cluster, pack to the peg, body to the bench. Stare at the simmering pot as if it were a holy relic in terracotta. Some pilgrims show badges tin saints hammered thin, a tiny lead ampulla that once held water from a shrine, a scallop shell scuffed smooth. One man claims his shell touched the tomb of St. James itself. Another claims he did too, and that it winked. Everyone is too tired to call it a lie. Everyone is too kind to call it a truth. The hospitaler collects the boasting with the same care they collect cloaks off the damp shoulders of the timid. Now the ritual of welcome widens. A blessing for the strangers drawn into this little ark. A ladle dipped into the pot and tilted toward your bowl until weight settles into your palm. A crust of bread whose best quality is that it exists. You blow across the surface of the stew. It smells of onion, a bone you hope once had ambitions, and the wild generosity of cabbage. The first mouthful makes your mind unclench. The second convinces your spine that life continues. A rule board, really a plank with paint and patience, leans near the door. The sister taps it with the ladle handle for emphasis, reading the house rules with the sing-song of a person who has recited them since the reign of a king whose name no one remembers. Curfew, after complying. When the last prayer goes up, the door goes down. No heroic late-night quests, not even to retrieve the shoes you forgot in the yard. Fires live only in their proper places. Candles are counted. No pilgrims auditioning for the role of reason the hospital burned in tomorrow's miracle play. Silence after compline. Holy or at least ambitious. Whisper if you must. Snore if you cannot help it. Confess your sins in daylight. Keep your pouch tied. God forgives. Thieves have faster hands than angels have wings. The brother adds a bonus law with a smile that is mostly teeth. And no fighting about who saw the bigger miracle. The saints love peace almost as much as they love plausible details. You take your bowl to a bench. It's a citizens' assembly. A woman with a scallop shell pinned to her veil. Two students arguing in Latin about the true root while both manage to be wrong. A mason with hands like bread loaves. A boy who wears his father's cloak as if it were a promise. They make room the way exhausted people do by migrating 3 inches and pretending it's a mile. Steam rises from bowls. The smell of broth softens the edges of the room. The first few spoonfuls are quiet, the way thunder is quiet when you're inside it. Where from, someone asks. Because pilgrims introduce themselves by distances, not names. How many days? Someone else asks. Because time is a saint's favorite currency. You trade road rumors with the seriousness of diplomats. A bridge washed out, a shrine with a kind old priest, a band of lads who accept prayers as tolls if coins are scarce. Someone swears they saw a wolf cross the path at noon, and that it looked back with the sadness of a Benedictine. No one knows what that means. Everyone nods as if they do. Once bowls are licked tactfully clean, bread is an excellent spoon if you have theological permission. The hospitaler guides you through the rest of the initiation. A pallet is promised. So is a blanket with ambitions to be warmer than at Island. They open a cupboard with the theatrical gravitas of a reliquary and produce one candle, tall as your thumb and twice as proud. Use it wisely, the sister says, as though it were a fragile heirloom and not a wax soldier destined to die at the foot of a flea-bitten bedroll. Congrats, she adds, deadpan. You've unlocked the deluxe package. Floor, stew, and one. 1 candle. You salute with the candle like a knight with a tin sword. She does not laugh, but her eyes do. Next, the basin of warm water becomes communal, passed down the line of bowed heads. The brother murmurs a blessing across it, something about weary feet finding a right road. And everyone pretends not to notice how many times the color has changed. A boy sniggers. The boy's mother applies the universal maternal correction behind his ear. A pilgrim with a cough is escorted to the pallet nearest the hearth and offered thyme. Another with a cut is given wine for the wound and none for the mouth, which is the sort of asceticism that proves this place is serious. You ask, timidly, whether there is a place for your pack. The answer is yes, and the place is against you. Packs sleep like frightened cats, wherever their person island. The rule board did not bother to write that one down. The road etched it into everyone's spine. A sister demonstrates how to thread your strap through your arm so that if a thief tries midnight theology, liberating your belongings while you dream, you will wake to practice your doctrine of righteous shouting. Near the door, a little shelf holds wax and string, spare pins, a needle that looks like it has survived 3 plagues and 1 ambitious sweater. The hospitaller loans these like sacraments and receives them back with the same solemnity. In the corner stands a big jar for alms. You drop a coin if you have one. If not, you drop a promise, which the brother nods at as if it were legal tender. Here, vows are a currency God honors on his own schedule. The jar is heavy with copper and gratefulness. Somewhere between the second ladle of stew and the first yawn, the bell for compline throbs through the rafters. Not loud, not urgent. Just a heavy sound that lands in the bones like a warm hand. The room folds around it. Spoons set down. Benches pushed back. A collective shrug as cloaks pull into order. The dormitory will wait. First, the night's last psalm. But that is Section 2's work. For now, the arrival continues in the little chores of belonging. A sister shows you where to set your boots so the fire can glare at them into dryness. She demonstrates the house knot for tying your pouch. Twice through, twist, press, amen. The brother points to a row of hooks for cloaks and a lower row for staves. He warns that the tall ones have a habit of thwacking those who stand up too quickly. Penance without paperwork. The rules of the place soak in as easily as heat. If you rise in the dark, carry your candle cupped. If you cough, turn from face. If you must talk after complying, whisper the way moss grows. Do not ask the cook what made the broth thick. Do not tell the cook what made your socks thicker. If you cry, pretend you are praying. If you laugh, pretend you are still crying. Both are true. People trickle over the threshold in 2s and 1s until the door's hinge starts to sound like an old man clearing his throat. They arrive with the looks of the newly shipwrecked, dazed, grateful, unaware that they are radiant with survival. A woman hands over a loaf she carried all day for the house pot. A man gives a scrap of salt. A child, stern with responsibility, presents a perfectly round pebble for the saint. The sister receives it like gold. A small shrine later grows 1 stone richer. At some point, you notice the one every house of the road seems to share, written in a dozen versions of the same handwriting. This house is poor. God is rich. If you eat, bless him. If you sleep, thank him. If you steal, remember he is faster than you are. Underneath, in a different ink, someone has added, and Sister Merit is faster still. The entire room, including Sister Merit, pretends not to see it. By the hearth, a pair of pilgrims compare maps the way fortune tellers compare cards. One has a careful parchment, the other has a memory. Both are wrong in exactly the ways that will make tomorrow interesting. A third pilgrim produces a scrap of vellum with a saint's prayer written in a fine hand. The brother identifies it as no one's handwriting he recognizes. Still, he says, if you pray sincerely, God will recognize the accent. The air inside has a weight now. The good kind that wraps your shoulders and tells your bones they are finished for the day. Blisters cool, faces unknot. Someone mends a strap, someone drowses. In the corner, a cat appears and inspects the newcomers with the professional suspicion of a customs officer. It chooses a pallet at random, makes biscuits into the blanket as if blessing grain, then becomes a comma at the edge of someone's fatigue. Outside, the sky finishes turning from pewter to ink. The last latecomer stumbles in, more mud than human. and the hospitaller does not sigh out loud. The ladle dips. The basin steams again. Names, origin, vow. The script repeats, because hospitality is a liturgy that never runs out of verses. You tuck your one candle into your palm and practice the art of walking without flame. The sister leads you through a doorway, scuffed with pilgrim shoulders into a long room that will soon be a choir of snores. Pallets sit shoulder to shoulder like boats lashed in a storm-calm harbor. The window is a black square cut into the wall. The moon wears it like a brooch. Your blanket is rough, clean enough. Your straw rustles like a field remembering summer. You lay your pack where you were told, against your belly like a loyal dog, and thread the strap under your arm the way the sister showed you. The candle stub watches you from the floor, the tiny throne of a tiny king. You exhale. Something in your chest that has been clenching since sunrise hears a small bell rung inside your ribs and lets go. In a few minutes, the compiler will gather and set the lid on the day. After that, silence, aspirational, darkness, negotiated, sleep, eventually. But the arrival, this sweet pragmatic mercy of being taken in, deserves its own full stop. You look down at your feet, pink and ridiculous in the candlelight. Pull the blanket to your waist and think, I am indoors. I am accounted for. I am, for one night, someone else's responsibility. The road hums outside. The pot sighs. The staff, forest whispers in the hall. The hospitaller's voice drifts from the doorway, counting candles, counting heads, counting perhaps their own blessings. Rest, they say, to the room and to you, and to the thin distance between you and all the miles still ahead. Deluxe package. Floor, stew, and one candle. You'd pay a king's ransom for less. By the time the bell for Compline fades into the beams, the room has settled into that soft, hushed industriousness that precedes sleep. The threading of straps through buckles, the censorious cough of a blanket shaken too vigorously, the tiny thunder of crumbs being coaxed from a travel pouch. Someone by the window is retying a rosary. Someone by the hearth is negotiating a truce between a blister and a boot. And here and there, like stars surfacing as dusk deepens, the silver-white gleam of scallop shells begins to appear, pinned to hats, stitched to cloaks, tied to staff cords with scraps of dyed string. You could be blind and still see them by sound. The faint tick-tick as a shell knocks against a tin badge, the dry whisper of its ridges under a thumb, the careful way someone sets a hat down so the shell faces upward, like a moon needing respect. The scallop is more than decoration. It is an introduction, passport, map, and, when necessary, portable advertisement for miracles. You wear it to declare, I am going that way, westward, toward the saint, and I am walking for more than sore feet. A woman across from you lifts hers, string looped through a hole drilled near the hinge, and shows its ribs fanning out like the spokes of roads. See, she says, drawing a fingertip along the grooves. All lines point to one place. Someone else snorts that the place is whichever cookshop smells least like regret, but the woman gently taps the shell again, and the room yields the joke to the devotion behind it. Whether the shell came from the distant coast or from a stall 3 towns back barely matters. It means you've joined the same long, stubborn procession of need and gratitude. Shells do the small, practical work, too. They scoop, sip, scrape, and measure. You'll see an old man tomorrow morning use his to ladle a sip of spring water into a child's mouth. You'll use yours to skim the fat eyes off a pot of broth, or to nudge a coal back where it belongs. Some pilgrims swear a shell cracked at the shrine is lucky proof it felt the saint, and will carry both halves stitched to their cloak. A broken moon making a vow. Others swear only shells acquired at the far western edge count. A kindly brother will later remind you, all vows count if your feet travel with them. Pinned beside many shells are pilgrim badges, little miracles in base metal, all personality and provenance. Lead tin, mostly, poured into molds that remember saints better than most people do, then snipped free and pricked with holes so they can ride your hat brim or your cloak edge. Some are familiar even to sleepy eyes. A sword and a book for James. A little Canterbury arch, if your road began in England. The radiant wheel of some other shrine that someone insists you should detour to, as if detours were invented solely for your benefit. They flash when the fire turns in the grate, each a boast that pretends to be a prayer. There's a man here tonight who wears a veritable curtain of them badges, marching around his hat like a toy army on parade. If he shakes his head, the room jingles. The sister hospitaler eyes him with the wary affection one reserves for men who collect things because the weight satisfies an itch their heart can't reach. He claims he can tell stories about each badge until the pot boils dry. Please do not encourage him. Of course you encourage him. He points. That little ship was from a shrine by the sea where the wind preached better sermons than the priest. That tiny bottle, askew on its pin, once held oil from a lamp that burned by a martyr's tomb, and now holds what can only be described as optimism. Ah, yes, ampullae, the tiny flasks with cheeks like plums, stamped on both sides with a saint's emblem or a shrine's name, corked and sealed with wax, then worn like medals of patient hope. They are supposed to carry holy water, oil, or dust, and some actually do. More often, they carry a sticky rumor of what they once contained, a scent that could be olive or could be last summer. They're talismans of proximity. This touched that, which touched the saint. Now it touches me. The chain of contact is half theology, half human hunger, wholly sincere. Badge and ampulla sellers know this hunger and kindly meet it. If you pass an abbey gate at any hour short of apocalypse, someone will be there with a tray, the aluminum kiosk of its day. Saints pressed in metal, saints in wax, saints on parchment, saints on everything but a loaf of bread. And if bread took stamping well, they'd consider it. Prices adjust with your face. The pious get a discount, or so they think. The cynical get a story, which they claim they don't want but listen to anyway. A boy hawker will demonstrate how the ampulla's loop lays flat on a cloak stitch, as if he were teaching you surgery. An old woman will swear her badges don't tarnish if you say a prayer with the purchase. Some stalls promise blessed badges they are, and blessed prices they aren't. Outside the hospital where you stopped last week, the marketplace was a cheerful rattle of litanies and haggling. A hawker bellowed that his shells were washed in the very wave that kissed the saint's shore, to which the river flowing behind him offered a polite cough. Another waved a bundle of thin lead metals that glittered like dull fish. Guaranteed genuine, he cried, which is to say, you could get a second one free if you asked archly enough. If the relic's guaranteed genuine, it probably came with a second one free. Pilgrims learn to smile at the line and buy anyway. Because faith is not a courtroom. It is often a marketplace where your yearning selects the better goods. But the relic trade is not only street barkers and gleam. It is warehouses of holiness, sacred distribution routes, and the quiet quotidian bureaucracy of the miraculous. In this century, a relic might be a bone shard in a reliquary carved like a church, a square of linen cut from a saint's old shirt, a lock of hair plaited so finely that time itself blushes to touch it. Or it might be a brandium, a strip of cloth laid upon a tomb, then sent, like a telegram of grace, to places that cannot move the tomb but can move hearts. The supply chain is a braid of barter, patronage, and persuasion. Abbots writing to abbesses, bishops writing to princes, all of them writing to God in the line above. Authenticity is a dance as ancient as commerce. Every traveler knows the stories. 3 heads of the same martyr on display across Europe. 2 right arms of the same bishop working overtime in different cathedrals. A saint whose teeth seem to have multiplied like loaves into a dozen reliquaries, all very convincing. But the economy of the relic relies less on perfect provenance than on participation. You kneel, you touch, you hope, you change. Sometimes in ways a physician can measure, more often in ways that physicians should humbly step back from. The brother here would say, "Ask if it healed your bitterness. If yes, it was genuine." The sister would add, "And if it didn't, perhaps it will on the second try." The cynical crew make their own weather. You've met them on the road. Professional beggar, pilgrims with a conscience made of rubber and a cloak made of pockets. Merchants who invest in a sack of scallop shells in a port as far from Santiago as the moon is from the fishmonger. Clever smiths who carry a mold in a bag to cast badges whenever a crowd's mood tilts toward piety. City councils try to regulate, their seals pressed in wax on official badges, their rules nailed to gates. But piety is a wind that blows out regulations as easily as candles. And even the strictest preacher, thundering about fakes, lowers his voice at night and pins a small badge to his inner sleeve. just in case. Inside the dormitory, authenticity is measured in other ways. The weight of a shell after a day's heat, the sound of a badge clicking as your hand trembles with exhaustion, the comfort of pressing an ampulla to your lips even if it only tastes like old tin and remembered oil. A young man near you fingers a tiny badge of St. Michael and whispers that he bought it the same day a bandit spared him. The room nods, each person thinking of their own coincidence, writing it like an illuminated letter over the dark margin of fear. A woman loosens the string of her ampulla just enough to dab a cross on her child's forehead. The child promptly licks it off and declares it not wine. Holiness laughs softly and goes on working in ways that do not require flavor. If you listen long enough, you'll hear the ethics of holy merch debated in voices no louder than a blanket's rustle. Are we turning grace into trinkets? Someone wonders. Are trinkets sometimes the only way a hand knows how to hold grace? Someone answers. The brother, when asked, he is always asked, shrugs into wisdom. If a badge reminds your feet to keep a promise, where to? The sister adds, but stitch them well. Tin tiers, cloaks. Practicality is the mother of piety here. Earlier, outside the gate, the market had its own liturgy. A badge maker cooled his mold in a basin between pores, steam lifting like prayers that smell faintly of metal. He worked with an efficiency that made you think of monks illuminating a page, repetition toward beauty, skill toward devotion. A hawker with 6 teeth and the confidence of a senator offered shells pre-drilled. No blisters for your needle, friend. A girl with a basket of cheap ampullae did not claim their contents were anything other than hope. But hope is a perfectly respectable commodity on this road. A priest from a nearby church stamped badges with a little hand seal, an indulgence in miniature, a municipal miracle license. And yes, there are copycats. The badge maker will tell you, in a tone of amused resignation, that he recognizes his own saints when they come back to him slightly, improved by competitors. The scallop shells multiply faster than the sea could feed them. A rough fisherman from a place that has never seen an ocean sells river scallops with an honest face and a dishonest mollusk. You think you're immune to the hustle until you hold the thing, until a scrap of tin catches the firelight just so. And you see, not cleverness, but a tiny door. You buy the door and pin it to your hat. You intend to knock on it when the night hurts. The badges also do simple social work. They tell the gate guard you are pilgrim, not vagrant, even if you are both, depending on his mood. They tell the farmer who lets you sleep in his loft that you come with a blessing attached, or at least a story. They tell the tavern keeper which tale to tell you in return, because pilgrims are a marketplace for stories, and every town has stock to move. They tell other travelers who you are without your mouth having to say it. I am headed to where you too are headed. Perhaps we can be imperfect together for a mile. As the pallets fill and the 1 candle per person chalks gentle gold onto faces, the relic talk softens into that half-drowsy cataloging people do before sleep. A man enumerates his badges like counting beads, each with a 1-line memory. Rain, blessing, broken strap, kind woman, hot bread, miracle, small, miracle, questionable but accepted. A girl listens and then offers a single, simple relic held in a cloth twist, a thread from her mother's shawl. No one dares say third-class relic. No one dares say only a thread. Threads have their way of stitching the world to itself. The hospitaller makes their final rounds, collecting stray embers of speech. Hide your badges under the cloak edge, the sister advises, not because they are precious metal, but because grief is always in the market, and grief has fast hands. If your ampulla leaks, the brother says, we have cork. If hope leaks, the saint does. He is not smiling when he says it. He rarely smiles when he's right. You find your own shell with your fingertips in the dark and lay it on your breastbone like a calm hand. The ridges press a little, enough to remind your lungs to do their small, faithful work. Metal whispers against thread. Around you, the soft clatter of other people's devotion settles into stillness. The room smells of wool and faint oil, and the thrillingly unremarkable scent of human sleep preparing to happen. Tomorrow, outside the next gate, the marketplace will form itself again like a flock. Hawkers, copyists, careful craftsmen, a priest with a stamp, a boy who has learned the difference between blessed and blessable. You will walk through it with your shell reflecting noon. You will stop, inevitably, and finger a new badge you do not need but somehow require. You will promise yourself that this is the last one. It will not be the last one. Faith collects mementos because the heart prefers to verify its own pulse by touch. For tonight, the reliquary is simple. Bones knit by fatigue, cloth warmed by breath, a roomful of strangers united by geography's oldest sacrament, going somewhere together. The saint, wherever he is in the unseen architecture, smiles at the tin and lead and shell and thread and says, "Very well. We will work with what you brought." You close your eyes. On your hat, your badges settle into silence. On your chest, the shell lifts and falls with the tide of your ribs. If the relic is genuine, it will make you kinder. If it is not, perhaps you will do the work yourself, and call it even. Either way, the road will judge. Either way, the West will wait. And if, at dawn, a hawker promises that the next holy trinket is guaranteed genuine, you already know the rule. Smile, bargain, and check whether it comes with a second one free. The dormitory is a geography lesson drawn in straw and shadows. Pallets lie shoulder to shoulder like loaves in a baker's oven. Each one a rectangle of compressed reeds stitched into burlap and hope. A low row of rushlights, seesaws along the wall, pinned into iron brackets, their small flames making the air quiver with the smell of tallow and warm wool. You learn the floor plan in a heartbeat. Hearth end, blessed, middle band, bearable, door end, drafts, destiny, and sudden dogs. Welcome to bedfellow diplomacy, where status, stamina, and temperature negotiate a truce every night. You do what everyone does. You unroll your cloak as if it were luxury linen, fold your pouch into a pillow as if it were goose down, and align your staff along the pallet's edge like a respectable bed rail. Boots tuck under the straw, half to keep them warm, half to keep them yours. Your hat goes by your head, scallop shell facing up, not because you're vain, but because it tells whatever passerby wanders the aisle at midnight. Pilgrim here. Please step around the miracles. The hospitaller motions with 2 fingers merciful traffic control in a room that breathes. Warm end for the lame, the sister says, guiding a limping widow to a pallet by the hearth. Near the doorway for those who cough, the brother adds, which is polite for, "May your contagions rush outdoors." Children nestle into the lee of their mother's back. An old soldier edges toward the warm stones with the tactical precision of a siege. A penitential youth plants himself near the door, as if to keep vigil over drafts and sorrows alike. No one says the rules aloud, but the choreography is ancient. The frail and the pregnant toward the fire, the sturdy with good cloaks toward the wind, the loud snorers, once identified, exiled to the frontier where the room meets the weather. Your neighbors for tonight arrive like characters in a story you will remember for years. A merchant whose belt purse never leaves his fist. A widow who ties her rosary to her wrist as if it were a lifeline. A soldier whose scarred knuckles look like small hills on a map you'd rather not travel. A penitent who whispers, "Lord, have mercy," so softly that the words barely weigh anything. And then there is the man 2 pallets down who snores like an organ. The full cathedral instrument, pedalboard and all. He is not yet asleep, and still you can hear him breathing with a promise. The pallets flex and release with the weight of bodies. You feel the straw's stubborn stems through the cloak. The little prickles that remind you softness is a modern luxury. Your pouch, now a pillow, is lumpy but loyal. You wedge your staff against the wall to keep the straw from migrating into the aisle. Someone's cloak tickles your elbow. Someone else's elbow tickles your patience. A sister moves silently with a crocks of salve, dabbing a blister here, a cracked heel there, a mercy disguised as ointment. Heat is its own economy, and every inch of it is bartered. Those nearest the hearth move like lizards on warm rock, eyelids dropping first. Those out by the door calibrate their cloaks to the wind's mood and develop an intimate relationship with their own breath. In the middle, where most of you are, warmth and cold fight a slow, gentlemanly duel. People turn in sympathetic waves, one rolling over, then the next, until an entire belt of sleepers has shifted and the room creaks as if it were a ship. Someone tugs the blanket of air in your direction. You tug it back with a shrug. No words necessary. The unspoken rules are etched into bone. Don't hog the cloak. Don't trespass with knees. Turn with the tide. And if you must cough, cough into the century. old sleeve that has seen worse. Mixed company is the rule, not the exception. Men and women, separated where the house is strict. Mingled where the house is used to improvisation. Married couples traveling together. Widows without. Novices with shaved crowns hiding under hoods. A cart driver who swears he once slept on a pallet with a mule and found the mule better conversation. The sister draws a curtain of coarse linen between sections where modesty demands it. It sways when someone sneezes, a sale of discretion. Some travelers arrive with bed customs as particular as liturgy. The merchant wraps his belt twice around his arm and then around the pouch, transforming sleep into a pretzel of security. The soldier places his dagger under the pallet, with the blade pointed outward, the medieval equivalent of a do not disturb sign. Please do not test it. The widow props her feet against her bundle to keep them above the cold. The penitent insists on lying with his hands crossed, until someone mutters that the dead do it that way, and he adjusts, eyes wide, chastened by folklore. You learn by watching, by imitating, by quietly abandoning what does not keep you warm. And then the pests clock in for their shift. Fleas rise like a constellation whenever a blanket snaps. Lice enjoy the social mixing as much as the pilgrims do. Bed bugs, patient archivists of human history, page through your ankles with tiny annotations. You scratch, you sigh, you tell yourself this is simply a more intimate communion of saints than the theologians intended. The room performs the nocturnal chorus. Every hospitalia knows. A shiver, a scratch, a cough, a creak, the brush of straw like applause. Someone whispers that Saint Roch never itched like this. Someone else whispers back that of course he did. He just didn't complain in Latin. Protocol emerges from discomfort. If you must leave the pallet at night, privy, prayer, or pebble in your soul, you angle your exit so your knees do not patent themselves on your neighbor's ribs. If you steal heat with your shins, you pay it back with your shoulders. If your cloak drifts, you guide it back like a wayward child. And if you tug too boldly and meet equal resistance, the treaty is renegotiated with millimeters, not words. In the dark, rules are tactile. The sisters enforce gentle order with a look. Silence after compline, the sign at the door said, "And silence is here," though it is a Roman silence, not an angelic one full of human burrs. When a newcomer begins a loud tale, a hand descends on his shoulder, with the weight of heaven and a hint of garlic. Later, when an argument between two friends threatens to vibrate the rushlights, the brother glides over, murmurs something about tomorrow's miles weighing more than tonight's pride, and their pride folds like a traveling stool. Even the organ snorer receives attention, an extra cloak bunched beneath his neck, a small tilt to re-aim the thunder toward the rafters. It helps. Somewhat. You become acutely aware of microclimates. A foot length to the left, warmer. 2 handspans down, a hole in the wall's plaster channels a silk thread of winter onto your cheek. Your body learns to surf the atmosphere. You turn your back to the draft and spoon your own bundle. The soldier, ever the strategist, uses his shield of a cloak to deflect the wind toward the aisle. The merchant, having lost one battle with cold, bribes the penitent with a corner of bread for a corner of blanket. We do not judge, we only record. Along the hearth, a child kicks off her coverlet and is quickly recocooned by 2 neighboring strangers who do not discuss it. Charity sleeps lightly and adjusts quilts. There are private devotions that become night habits. A woman lays 3 pebbles beneath her pallet in a triangle for Father, Son, and Spirit. The geometry of comfort. A man touches his shell, then his heart, then the door, mapping a safe path for his dreams. Someone tucks a badge into his cap and slides the cap under his chin as if the saint were now his jaw's guardian. A boy whispers goodnight to the statue of the Virgin painted on the dormitory wall. The paint is cracked, and somehow the cracks make her kinder. The room blushes with small courtesies. A blanket corner retrieved and returned without a word. A cough met with a palm on the back, 3 gentle taps. Water passed hand to hand without inspection. And the bargains, of course. Heat for quiet, space for patience, edge of palate for first ladle of stew tomorrow. The economy is tender and immediate, the kind that teaches humility quicker than sermons. Everyone will tell you the Camino has lessons. Few will tell you the most urgent ones are about elbows. Pallets squeak when turned. Straw sighs when surrendered. Your spine maps every reed. You make a nest from cloak and sack, and the faith that morning always comes. On the far wall, a rushlight gutters and is pinched closed by a careful thumb, darkness pooling there first, and then walking outward across the room on soft feet. Your eyes adjust, your ears grow clever. You begin to separate organ snore from draft whistle, rosary whisper from mouse gossip, soldier's dream grunt from palate complaining in wood dialect. Inevitably, diplomacy has its comedies. Your neighbor, half asleep, draws your cloak up to his ear with the casual entitlement of a husband 15 years into marriage. You reclaim an inch, he reclaims a philosophy. Somewhere between inch and philosophy, the two of you arrive at marital detente without ever having exchanged names. Later, when 1,000 candles of moonlight tilt through the shutters and silver every straw, he murmurs, "Good night," in the tone of someone who has every legal right to your blanket. The stranger claims half your cloak and wishes you good night, as if you're married. You consider filing for annulment at dawn. There are, as every dormitory knows, emergencies. A nightmare knocks into waking, and the sister is there with a palm and a psalm. A cramp blossoms like a bad idea in someone's calf, and 3 sets of hands knead it away because we are, at bottom, a cooperative species. A bladder negotiates its terms with faith. Faith triumphs only sometimes. The privy trek is a pilgrimage within the pilgrimage. The cold corridor, the polite avoidance of eye contact with the rushlight's lonely flame, the humbling reminder that everybody is mortal, and late-night floors are unkind. And there is theft, or the fear of it, which is often heavier than the act. You loop your purse thong around your wrist. You slide your staff through your bundle straps as if weaving a spell. You sleep with one ear open and the other voting for hope. The hospitallers do what they can. A watchman in the hall, a door bar that bites down after curfew, a pair of dogs who consider themselves deputies. They've seen it all, and most thieves choose easier pickings than a room full of light sleepers with stout sticks within arm's reach. Just when you think you have negotiated every treaty possible with your bedding, the organ starts. It begins with a tentative pedal tone, expands into a chord, and then pipes open. The rafters vibrate. Birds, 3 towns over, reconsider their nests. You and a dozen others roll in an ecumenical wave of resignation. The sister, who has fought wars the church never wrote down, pads over and lifts the snorer's chin with 2 fingers, adds a folded scrap of cloth beneath it, and the storm drops a degree. The room exhales a prayer no liturgy contains. And so the night finds its rhythm. First, sleep settles like a shawl. Somewhere in the middle hours, you wake, not fully, just enough to register that you are warm enough, that your pouch is where it should be, that the widow still breathes in little knitting needle stitches, that the soldier's hand has finally slackened, letting go of a fight that lives only in his tendons now. You drift. The fire ticks. The door shivers. A mouse executes a tiny miracle beneath the pallets by surviving an encounter with a boot. When dawn reaches in with its pale wrists, you will peel yourself from the straw and count not the hours slept but the treaties kept. You will have learned 3 new ways to fold a cloak for warmth, 2 new techniques for reclaiming it, and 1 new respect for the mercy of strangers. No one slept perfectly. Everyone slept enough. In a world where tomorrow's miles begin as soon as your souls remember their task, enough is a sacrament. And if you roll over one last time and your neighbor has, in his sleep, tucked your cloak under his chin like a vow, be kind. The Camino marries strangers for a night and sends them to divorce at breakfast with blessings and blisters. Tonight's bedfellow diplomacy becomes tomorrow's road courtesy. Besides, you have a secret weapon he doesn't. You know exactly how to reclaim an inch without starting a war. The dormitory exhales, and then, as if the whole room remembers it is a church before it is a bedroom, inhales again. Somewhere near the hearth, a small bell rings. 1 clear note, followed by the rustle of cloaks and the soft drum of staffs set aside. A sister lifts a hand, palm down, not to hush so much as to gather, and the whole hospitalia tilts toward the chapel end of the hall, where an icon lamp burns like a tame star. Top-line by firelight is less ceremony than climate. You move with the others, shuffling in straw-soft steps, and find a place among them, kneeling on a board bench, standing if your knees have opinions, sitting if the day has turned your legs to jarred milk. A psalter opens with the particular crackle of used leather. One of the brothers, voice worn to felt by years of prayer and wind, intones the opening, and answer rises from a dozen throats. Rough, young, high, old, breathy, fearless, frightened, not a choir. A chorus. The difference is comfort. The psalms travel like a tide against the rafters. In pace in adipsum dormiam et requiescam, someone near you murmurs, "In pace I shall lie down and sleep," and for a second the words feel like water poured over your scalp. Your eyes sink, not in sleep, but in rest. That is almost its antechamber. You can smell the room differently now. Less stew and leather, more smoke and beeswax, and that mineral hint of damp stone where the wall meets earth. The sister lifts a thin taper to the icon lamp and carries the flame down the line of rushlights like a rumor you want to believe. The Salve Regina is everybody's favorite lullaby, even for those who pretend otherwise. It starts uncertainly, a few voices leaning out ahead, and then it widens as more people step into the river. Salve Regina, Mater Misericordiae. The melody is simple enough to catch, generous enough to hold mistakes without complaint. You sing it the way pilgrims do, with the parts of your throat and chest that are still tired and somehow grateful about it. The soldier, 2 places down, hums more than sings. The widow sings the alto line you didn't know your ear needed. A child whispers syllables he doesn't understand and somehow understands entirely. In the corner, the organ snorer blessedly awake adds a bass so soft the floorboards approve. When the hymn thins into silence, the intentions begin. That gentle litany where needs are braided into the night, like hair. Not shouted, offered. A woman fords the quiet first. For the past tomorrow, if the ice would hold its tongue. A lad for his mother's name, Day, miles east and stitched into his heart like a pocket. A merchant for a bridge rumored washed out. The soldier for comrades who walk in his dreams and never find a bed. A penitent for sins he cannot tally, and a forgiveness he cannot imagine. You say something small and private, almost to your teeth, about knees and courage and the way blisters negotiate with faith. The sister collects these like coins and lays them down before the fire, where sparks leap as if to carry them upward, where the icon lamp nods like an elder who has heard it all and is still kind. After the prayers, the hospitaller ushers you, anyone who can pass the votive wall. It isn't a grand basilica's marble, but a timbered panel stained darker than its neighbors by smoke and years and fingertips. On it, the Museum of Gratitude. Crutches left behind like shedskins. A pair of worn-out boots pegged high, their soles patched with miracles. A few wax limbs, arms, feet. A child's tiny hand candied in warm light. Tin hearts hammered thin as leaves. Wooden plaques scratched with names and dates and the briefest legends. For the fever stilled, for the river spared, for bread, when there was nothing. One grotesque little ex voto, a wax ear, shines with a ridiculous tenderness that makes you want to laugh, and then not at all. Smoke has archived everything here. Each offering wears a filmy veil of soot, and the soot is its own testimony. Flame has lived and died in this place. Night after night, someone has brought exhaustion and fear and laid them down like kindling, dawn after dawn. Someone has found enough strength to lift the door bar. The sister speaks softly. Leave what you can, take what you must. Some pilgrims press a coin between the wall's planks as if the wood will buy medicine. Some whisper a name and touch the wax of a little foot, hoping to borrow its memory of walking. Thin wine appears, more priestly than pleasant, and with it the stories come, carried on breath that smells of cloves and sour apples. This is how miracle lore is maintained, not by proclamation, but by bedtime gossip, retold between careful sips and careful hopes. A man from the north tells of storms stilled, how the wind clawed at his cloak for hours across a bald ridge, and then, at the half-ruined cross that marks the crest, dropped its anger like a sack. The widow tells of wolves turned with nothing but the sign of the shell, how the animals circled and then lowered their heads as if they remembered a better hunger and trotted off into the pine like monks late for office. The merchant, who has the cautious eyes of someone fond of mathematics, swears he saw debts forgiven in a market square when a moneylender, upon seeing the pilgrim badge, tore a parchment in two and kissed the fragments because St. James once carried him out of a ditch in his father's tale. You could call it charity or calculation. He calls it a ledger, balanced by a fisherman. There are smaller miracles, too, and the room treasures them because most of life is small. A blister that vanished between one milestone and the next, like a sulking child coaxed home. A loaf that did not look large enough and then was. A fever that climbed into a cart and stayed there so the child could sleep. A quarrel that dissolved into bread and tears. A lost purse returned by a boy who wanted the saint to notice him and found the saint sometimes uses boys like that. And yes, someone mentions the big tale. The one about the shining knight who rode down out of a cloud onto a battlefield and made Christians brave and Moors flee. But the sister gives the storyteller a look that says, "Fine for the road, not for the dormitory. Tonight is not for heroes, it is for feet." The skepticism in the room, such as it is, belongs mostly to people who have been disappointed by the world and are trying not to travel with that fact wrapped around their ribs. The soldier listens to the wolf's story with half a smile and a half-lidded eye that says he has known worse predators. Still, he touches his shell. The merchant takes another sip of wine and looks like someone measuring the distance between coin and grace. Still, he slides a small copper toward the votive board. Doubt is not an enemy here. It is a roommate. A bit noisy. Sometimes eats your bread. Often right. Occasionally gracious. One pilgrim, cheeks flushed by prayer and walking, whispers that she dreamed last week of a man with dusty feet who told her to stop carrying a stone in her shoe. She woke to find a pebble tucked by the heel of her boot, the pebble she had put there on purpose to remember. She flushed, tossed it, and walked lighter. The sister smiles, a professional smile that contains 70 varieties of miracle, and says, "Yes." St. James is very practical. Someone asks the brother whether the wax limbs work. Do they persuade God? He shrugs with the handsome ambiguity of a man who has watched both fevers break and not. They persuade us, he says. They teach the hand how to ask again. You think of your own hand, the way it has gripped your staff all day, the way it aches now. It feels suddenly like a small animal that could be tamed by singing. The hush that follows is not empty. It's pantry full of relief, like a bowl of broth, of doubt stacked in tidy jars, of gratitude left uncorked, because it will be needed before morning. The fire drops into that amber mode, where it is less aflame than an ember audience, and every ember seems to nod on its little stem. People slide back toward their pallets slowly, the way you leave a kitchen after good bread and good talk, reluctant to disturb the air. Compline ends as it began, with hands. A sister passes among the pallets, touching foreheads with oil that smells faintly of rosemary and sheep, and Sunday she speaks the same words to each person, and somehow each lot of words arrives wearing a different coat. The brother follows with a ewer of warm water, and those who need it most bandaged, feverish, old, get their feet bathed in a bowl that has seen a century of feet and learned not to judge. It is, by every measure, a small night puddle of mercy. Back in your spot, you pull your cloak up, slide your pouch under your ear, and let the chorus take up where the psalms left off. The settled hush of bodies, the papery turn of a rosary, a far-off dog trying to be a wolf and failing adorably, the wind risking a draft and then thinking better of it, the fire offering a final pop like a period. You think of the votive wall's odd collection, the wax ear, the bent crutches, the boots fat with smoke, and it occurs to you that the hospitalia itself is an ex voto, 4 walls of thank you built onto a road. Before sleep properly coaxes you under, you take a mental inventory of the evening's rumors of miracles the way a prudent traveler tallies coins. Storms stilled, wolves turned, debts forgiven, bread not running out, blisters retreating, quarrels dissolving. The kind of courage that is more like housekeeping than like heroics. You do not decide which ones you believe. You decide you would like to have a few to take with you. Belief may come later, or not. The road will see to it. A final tiny bell sounds at the door as the bar is set. The organ snorer lets out a cautious prelude, as if testing the tuning, and then, by some grace of posture and the sister's folded cloth, he purrs at a tolerable chapel register. The child 2 pallets away breathes the even thread of a dreamer, newly sure the night has more allies than enemies. Your own breath joins the loom. Threads go over and under until the fabric of sleep begins to show itself in the dim. And as your mind loosens the last knots of the day, You make one last joke for yourself, because humor is also a sacramental. Counting miracles instead of sheep. More effective, less wool. If you run out of miracles, someone will tell you another tomorrow. If you run out of sheep, you will borrow a neighbor's snore. You do not sleep like a stone. You sleep like a pilgrim lightly tethered to the earth, with enough slack to dream of a shell glimmering at the edge of a map, of a past that opens in weather, of a wall where gratitude hangs in the shape of a little wax hand that has learned how to let go. The night holds, the door holds, the fire holds. Somewhere beyond the hospitalia's eaves, a road continues. Somewhere within, your bones learn the alphabet of rest. The fire gutters low, a red eye half closed, and the dormitory settles into that heavy wool blanket silence where sounds become thoughts and thoughts become sounds again. This is when the whispering starts. Not the miracle kind, the practical kind. The kind that smells faintly of tallow and caution. On the pallet to your left, a veteran pilgrim, the sort who ties his scallop shell with a knot that could moor a ship, mutters the litany of road warnings to a younger pair whose cloaks are still too clean. Not every shell is holy, he says, eyes on the rafters. Some are bait. If a man shows you 3 badges and no calluses, that man is a purse with legs. If he sleeps too far from the hearth, he's hiding. If he sleeps too close, he's hunting. The young ones nod like students at a sermon, and you tuck that into the same mental pocket where you keep the Salve Regina and the recipe for blister poultices. Because here is the truth every pilgrim learns. Bandits travel too. They wear the same mud on their boots, the same ash in their hair, the same shell on their chest if it suits the day's theater. They can say Ultrea with the right tilt of the chin. Some are imposter pilgrims, penitents on paper, highwaymen in practice, moving in the eddies of the Camino where trust makes the water run deep. Others are simpler, cut purses, with hands so soft they feel like gratitude when they touch your belt. Their favorite time is the hour after compline, when bodies slacken and vigilance nods off first. They specialize in sleeping travelers, harvesting coin the way gleaners take the last sheaves after harvest. A finger hooks a thong that wasn't knotted twice. A blade like a moonbeam kisses a pouch string. A hand slides beneath a cloak in the dark, where eyes make mistakes. In the morning, a traveler wakes to bread but no copper to buy it, and the road lengthens by the length of that absence. So people plan their sleep the way they plan the next day's miles. You watch a dozen small precautions braid themselves through the room, part superstition, part science, all learned the honest way. A merchant threads his purse thong through his belt binding, then ties the knot inside his tunic so a thief would have to undress him to get it. A widow tucks 3 coins in 3 places. One in the hem, the sewn, in saving, prickly but loyal. One in her shoe, which hurts, and that's the point. And one in her rosary pouch, because even thieves hesitate when a bead taps their knuckle. A lad uses his staff like a shepherd uses a crook blade along the edge of his pallet, one end under his forearm, so any tug wakes him with a memory of danger. The Hospitalia knows this dance, and has its house choreography. The brother made it plain at dusk. Silence after compline, doors barred, fires banked, pouches tied, strangers watched with charity and eyes. The bar across the door is a comfort you can hear, a solid wooden sentence ending with a period. The sister moves once more among pallets, her step as soft as soot, and pauses near the ones who've come in late, the ones who look like hunger with a shell. She gives them bread in the way experienced hosts do enough to change their eyes without making them bold, and everyone sleeps a little safer knowing the edge of desperation has blunted. Still, sleep is a wager, and so groups play the odds. Pilgrims who met at the gate agree to cluster 3 pallets together, 2 backs to the wall, one person with the bad knee taking the warmest spot by the hearth in exchange for the promise of second watch. A spare staff is propped so that if someone opens the door the wrong way, it will clatter and confess the intrusion. A dog, nobody's and everybody's, chooses the gap by your feet, the old 4-legged alarm who barks at dreams and thieves indiscriminately, a feature rather than a bug. You consider your own small treasury, a coin in the belt, 2 in the hem, 1 in the binding of your staff where the leather wrap crosses the knot, both prayer and trap. The rest of your valuables amount to a spoon, a needle, and the stubbornness to carry them. You tie your pouch with that double twist you learned in a market 3 towns back from a man who made a joke, and then showed you how to save a week's food with a sailor's knot. You push your boots under your pallet, soles out, laces looped around a bed slat so a hand tugging in the dark has to tug you, too. And then there's the other side of protection, the side with candles and saints. Out beyond the door bar, the Camino is strung with small, safe nodes the way ships string harbors along a coast. Crossroads, chapels, bridge shrines, hermit huts set into rock like swallows' nests, each lit by a holy lamp that burns low all night. Less a spotlight than a promise. Safe conducts are more often inked in oil than ink. That wick tells you someone will wake at noise, that someone has a bucket by the door, that someone knows the names of the men who haunt this stretch, and the names of the men who haunt those men. It is faith, yes, but it is also the neighborhood watch of old stone and warm oil. A sister once told you the lamps have two jobs, to please God and to offend thieves. Thieves do not like to be looked at by fire that never blinks. Lamps mark where witness lives. Even the bold prefer to work where the night can help them lie. So wayfarers learn the map of light. Which lanes angle you toward a guardian? Which bridges boast a chapel with a reredos of old swords left as votives by men who no longer needed them? Which hamlets hang a lantern high just to tell wolves and men alike that the village has an opinion about midnight? By habit, saints live in your head when you walk. At night, they rent more rooms. You inventory them the way a teamster counts oxen. James for the road, Christopher for the ford, Nicholas for your purse, Rock for your sores, Michael for your fear, Mary for the things you cannot name without crying. It's a squad of names you mutter when the door bar creaks in a gust and your heart decides to experiment with speed. Fear borrows their reputations. Courage pays the loan back with tomorrow's miles. That is the moral math of the Camino. And in the dark it scribbles itself on the inside of your chest. You believe enough to ask, you doubt enough to tie knots. You pray with your lips. You sleep with your staff under your arm. You try not to judge the man who sleeps too far from the hearth. You move your purse anyway. It isn't hypocrisy. It's prudence with a halo, that polite handshake between trust and common sense that keeps you walking and keeps you from losing the very coins that buy your bread to keep you walking. Outside, the wind noses along the eaves and finds the hairline cracks in the shutters. Somewhere a hinge complains, and a hinge is not a thief, but your body disagrees for 3 thumps of the heart. The dog snorts. A board settles. 2 pallets over, someone tests the knot of your spare staff with his toe. Just an accident, you tell yourself. And there is a correction in the dark. Friend? The softest question. Friend, comes the answer you wanted. Feet slide away. Sleep returns on cat paws. You breathe out the saint names like you're counting beads under your tongue. Tomorrow, you will put light between you and danger-loose clusters on the path. Not too tight to be bait, not too thin to be meat. You'll walk near people whose eyes you like and whose hands do not reach when they talk. You'll share water at the waystone and learn who has the blister recipe with onion skins and lard, and who has a knife you hope they only use on their dinner. You'll time your forest stretch, so you pass the bog by 3rd hour, when the mist has let go, and the footmarks are fresh and readable. Someone in the dorm, maybe the soldier, maybe the organ snorer, murmurs a story about the bridge hermit west of here. How he keeps his lamp in a niche where it shines out onto the last span, and how the light is an oath. Safe passage for the tired if they cross before Compline. Safe passage for the frightened if they cross at dawn. Trouble for those who try to run between those promises. He knows the river. The voice whispers, like a compliment, and sleep takes it away. You remember a town 2 days back where the watchmen carried Rattle's wooden clackers they spun when trouble staggered down an alley. One night they spun them at a drunk. The next night they spun them at a man whose walk was too quiet. In the morning the rumor said the man had 2 purses, and both of them cried when he dropped them. Rumor is not court, but rumor is a kind of broom. It keeps corners cleaner than nothing would. And then there was the chapel on the ridge with the iron-barred window where you could push a coin through to a box, and a man in the next room mumbled a blessing without looking up. Blessing by mail, slot efficient, anonymous, weirdly tender. The lamp there burned the color of tea. You stood in that puddle of light longer than you needed to because the wind bullied less in its circle, because a woman leaned her forehead on the stone and exhaled her fear the way a smith exhales when the iron finally bends. You turn over all, careful, a pilgrim being polite to your own joints, and see the shape of the staff in your peripheral vision, a thin, straight comfort. The scallop shell at its thong makes a shy click against the wood, a sound like amen in an old dialect. You think of the way a staff can be everything: third leg, tent pole, measuring rod for rivers, signal for help, cudgel if it has to be. Peace, you tell it, and it leans back against the pallet as if to answer, I am also tired. The dorm has its own alarm system that no thief understands until too late, the pattern of everyone's breath. Bodies fall into a shared tide, and when one current changes, when someone stands, when someone bends, when a coin thinks about moving, the tide notices. A woman coughs, a man snuffles, a dog cocks an ear, a staff ticks. No plan written on a wall could match the surveillance provided by exhaustion in company. And yet, for all this alertness, you do sleep. Not because you have no fear, but because you have made enough payments on the debt of precaution that rest will lend you the rest. The saints in your mind sit down on your bed rails like uncles who think you should eat and talk less. The lamp in the chapel down the lane burns a color you've now decided is safe. The staff will wake you if asked. The bar will argue with the door. The dog will choose the louder kind of dream if it has to. In the dream that finally finds you, the road is empty and not. It wears the shadows of trees like a habit. Figures keep pace, some with shells that shine too much, some with cloaks patched with hunger, some with hands you don't watch because your dream has better things to do. The shrines appear at their scheduled intervals, each lamp grieving a little for the moths and rejoicing a little for the men. A bridge hums underfoot like a hymn of wood. The hermit's niche throws tea-colored onto your boots. When a shadow steps out where the path narrows, you lift your staff and lift your saint names and discover you are less alone than even your dream has room to paint. Morning will give you fresh arithmetic. Who still has their coin? Who lost one and found two friends? Who will swear they felt a hand but woke to find nothing missing but fear? The old pilgrim will shrug and say, there are saints for thieves and saints for fools, and sometimes they are the same. You will shrug back and promise yourself 2 knots where one used to live, a different pocket for the spoon, a quicker pace through the gorse. You will thank the lamp even though lamps don't spend thanks. You will nod at the dog who once again did nothing except make sleep less lonely. For now, though, the dormitory is a field of low, human thunder breaths and snores, the stereo lullaby of bodies that survived another weekday of the Middle Ages. Somewhere a purse considers being stolen and decides to wait until the town fair. Somewhere a saint considers appearing and decides to let the lamp do it this time. You press your cheek into the bumpy geography of your rolled cloak, feel the beetle scale of the seam where you hit a coin, and smile into the fabric. The veteran pilgrim's credo sifts down like dust from a bean trust in God, but also ties your purse. St. James is busy. And at last, with that double knot of faith and prudence, you sleep. Midnight doesn't arrive with a bell. It arrives with your feet. They wake first, before your eyes, before your thoughts, announcing themselves like dignitaries who refused to sit in the cheap seats all day and are now filing formal complaints, heat throbs behind your toenails. Your arches pulse in counterpoint. Your heels hum like bees trapped under leather. Somewhere under a strip of linen, one blister sings a solo so pure it should be notated on vellum. Your knees, meanwhile, compose a letter in impeccable church Latin. Caramus, quare tot lapides? We petition, why so many stones? Around you, the dormitory exhales. The fire is a low red coin, the rafters, a dark rib cage. Pallets shift as bodies drift out of first sleep and into that wakeful interval the road teaches everyone to expect. This is the inventory of pain hour, when every tendon submits its ledger and even the proud admit, quietly, to the straw, that they are mortal. There is a choreography to it. A dozen travelers roll to sitting with the careful grace of people who have negotiated with their joints. A pilgrim with a shaved pate lifts his ankle and listens to it speak. A widow flexes her toes one by one and counts the clicks like beads. A merchant, solemn as a priest, unlaces his boot with both hands and a prayer. Please, no new surprises. A soldier whose feet have had more campaigns than birthdays peels back a bandage the color of the road and winces as if a small devil just remembered his name. And then the clinic opens, informal, mobile, suffused with vinegar and hope. A brother hospitaller brings the basin you remember from arrival. Warm water gone gray with road, a slosh gentle enough to make you sigh. He sets it by the hearth where embers have the manners to glow and not smoke. And the line forms. No order but courtesy. No payment but gratitude. If you look close, the basin is every stream you crossed today, every ford you dreaded, brought inside and tamed. The medicine chest is everybody's pockets. A woman produces a corked bottle of wine that is not for joy but for rinsing. Her grandmother taught her that wine is a patient teacher of cleanliness. Another pulls a stoppered flask of vinegar, sharp as an argument, to soak cloth and scare badness out of angry skin. Someone unwraps a twist of salt caught in parchment. Sprinkled, it tightens the world a little. From a pouch appears a lump of pig fat, pale and honest, to soften chafed places and make the rubbing parts remember they are, in fact, friends. A sprig of thyme emerges, green memory of summer tucked in a sleeve, crumbled into warm water until the air brightens. Time for bravery. Someone jokes, and the herb obliges with a clean scent that cuts through boot and candle. A pilgrim from the mountains has a square of pumice. He brushes heels with the patience of a stonemason smoothing a capital. Another has plantain leaves, crushed between thumb and forefinger until they weep green poultice for bites, for scratches, for the rash that pretends it is more important than your vow. An older man lays a strip of willow bark beside his palate and gnaws it without ceremony, letting the bitter talk to his aches the way old friends talk, bluntly, kindly, with results. The blister rite is performed with reverence and terrible efficiency. First, a needle bone, or steel if luck walked with you, passes through a candle flame until it blushes, then cools on air and a prayer. A woman threads it with clean linen, teased from the edge of a chemise offering, she says, and everyone nods because sacrifice is not always loud. You choose the plump, defiant dome on your heel, pierce low and sideways, and lace the blister with the linen so that it can weep itself empty in peace while you sleep. This is the Camino's neatest paradox. In order to walk tomorrow, you must stitch yourself tonight. Chafing gets its own liturgy, a thin smear of fat over the seam that taught you new vocabulary. A dusting of ground sage, someone swears, kept her uncle's oxen from rawness in harvest time. A pad of wool tucked where leather kissed skin too eagerly. For the knees that speak fluent Latin, there are bindings, strips of cloth warmed at the hearth, wrapped around patellae until the joint feels less like a theology exam and more like a hinge. You learn from a Breton that if you rub a coin over the kneecap 3 times and then buy bread with it, the bread forgives the knee. Magic? Economics? Pilgrims cannot always tell. There is advice. Because advice multiplies like sparrows. Cut your nails straight. Don't chase the pace of the long-legged. They have different saints. Put the bad foot toward the outside ditch when the wind fights. That way the slope steals some injury. Change your socks at Sext, says a woman who has not owned 2 pairs in a year, but means let your feet see daylight more than once. A younger man flirts briefly with pride, I do not need salves, then fails to stand without groaning and accepts pig fat like an absolution. 2 companions laugh so softly, it could be a blessing. The dog, that democratic nurse, stations itself near the basin and watches with eyes that prove it is possible to pity and be bored simultaneously. All this unfolds in the slow midnight wake, the hinge between first and second sleep that the road teaches better than any monk. The house rules honor it. No new fires, no loud talk, but basins allowed, bandages permitted, tears forgiven. A chamber pot scrapes. A floorboard confesses a secret in the corner. Someone tiptoes 2 steps too fast and the bar at the door answers with a small wooden Life is moved inch by inch toward comfort and then left there. The choir starts, 1 voice at a time and none of it musical on purpose. A cough with a scholar's rhythm. A prayer like a shy bird. A child's soft weeping that is not pain but homesickness finding a crack. A whispered Kyrie from the pallet nearest the wall. A whispered Christ returns from somewhere by the door. Straw rustles, that hiss of 1,000 thin stalks learning your weight and remembering to cradle it. The dog sighs with the depth of a saint, displeased by incense. Someone recites the Salve Regina, because words can be blankets when blankets are thin. The walls keep their part of the pact. They pass the city's night in with restraint. A cartwheel murmurs over ruts. Far bells argue with closer ones about what hour at island. From the lane comes the soft clap of a watchman's staff answering the stones, proof that there is a human line drawn around this house and that trouble would have to step over it. Somewhere a drunk sings half of a song and forgets the rest. From the kitchen, the shy rattle of a spoon. Someone is heating vinegar for a poultice, or stealing one more sip of weak wine to help a prayer make up its mind. You tend your own kit. The spoon you carry becomes a spatula for fat. The needle you guard like a relic gleams a moment, useful and dangerous like any other tiny apostle. The thread you counted out days ago shortens. The small linen squares you tore from the edge of your only decent shirt now curl on the hearthstones to dry, clean as a psalm. You consider your feet maps where today is drawn in red. You name tomorrow's rivers and hills, all the while rubbing time into the places where the boot promised friendship and delivered friction. And because pilgrims are generous even with pain, the teaching continues. A Spaniard shows a trick for ankle swelling. Elevate the heel on your rolled cloak. Breathe like you're blessing your own blood. A Gascon shows you how to lace your boot differently, so the tongue stops pinching the bone that insists it is nobility. A woman from the north demonstrates a knot that sits high, so it does not dig low. A brother whispers that if you can't sleep, count your breaths by decades and offer them to those who could not walk today. The room holds the hush of people trying the advice and finding it works enough to keep them kind. Visitors happen at midnight, quiet ones. A cat patrols, granting audience to ankles, accepting such worship as scratching and scraps of bread. A guest with a fever mutters to heaven in a provincial Latin that could be poetry. Someone lays a cool cloth on their brow that smells of vinegar and mercy. Near the door, a man with a splint rewraps it so softly the wood thinks it is being thanked. In the corner, two old friends compare scars like monks compare marginalia, admiring the illumination, arguing about the artist. It is in this interval that the dormitory soundtrack becomes something like comfort. Snore low drone, cough counter melody, rattle of beads rhythm section, straw sigh cymbal brush. If you've never fallen asleep to 100 small human noises, you can't know how well they confess your species as a choir. The misfit harmony lowers your pulse by simply reminding you other hearts are at work nearby. When your own turn with the basin comes, the water is warmer than you deserve. You soak the cloth, you wring it, you wince, you laugh because wincing looks ridiculous on a grown face, and laughter stretches what wincing tightens. You dunk your heel and imagine each beat of the blood is a herald announcing relief is coming, and for once the herald isn't lying. You lace a new thread through a new blister, tie it with a tender knot that will not cut tomorrow, and hold your foot near the fire until it feels like it remembers summer. Your eyes have been pretending they weren't tired. Now they admit their fraud. The clinic packs itself back into pockets. Pig fat goes to its waxy sleep. Vinegar gets its cork. The herb bundle returns to the fold of a sleeve. The basin receives the day's sins and is carried away like a small river heading gratefully downhill. Pallets recline in unison, a choreography without rehearsal. Second, sleep approaches on quiet feet. You rebuild your nest. Cloak as blanket, pouch as pillow, staff within the geography of your arm. You slip a folded scrap of wool under the ankle that screams loudest, give it a throne because it will be a subject tomorrow. You say one more short prayer, the kind that has no verbs. You tell your knees you heard their complaint in Latin and will answer in kind. Pax, peace. They allow a truce. Right before you fall, the dormitory performs its gentlest miracle. Someone's sob becomes someone else's lullaby. A breath lines up with another. A cough waits. The dog dreams of bread and does not bark. The floorboard that likes to complain forgets its story for a while. The fire, that old magistrate, stamps the hour with a tiny pop and then rests its hand. You slide under sleep like a pilgrim slipping into a stream slowly, grateful for the cool, and you do not stay there without stirring. You drift and rise, drift and rise. In the segmented tide the road demanded. First doze, midnight wake, second sleep. Between those waves, there are chamber pots and creaking floorboards, and the solemn procession of people who cannot remember if they prayed enough and decide to add one anyway. Between those waves, the medicine worked just enough to make tomorrow possible. Morning will measure what midnight bought. Blisters a shade paler, knees a tone quieter, straps retired with a better idea. But for now, the dormitory hums at the frequency of survival. and you surrender to it, the way bread surrenders to being broken and still manages to feed everyone. Humor, because truth is kinder with a grin. You didn't sleep. You negotiated a ceasefire with your feet. The first sound is not your own breath, not the stir of straw, but a duet no composer dared score. The matins bell tolling from a chapel you can't see, and a rooster with terrible pitch insisting he's the superior instrument. The bell is bronze and solemn. The rooster is ragged and personal, a throat clearing the morning out of itself. Together, they pull the dormitory up from second sleep the way a rope draws a bucket from a well, slowly, steadily, with the slosh of souls returning. Gray light presses through shutters and door frames, a thin broth of day ladled into the room. It finds the wet cloaks you hung last night, draped over pegs and bed ends, now filmed with a cold sheen. Moisture has traveled nowhere, and yet managed to be everywhere. The smell is morning's roll call, damp wool, last night's stew gone shy, ash sighing from embers, leather waking as straps flex, vinegar fading from poultices, and the brief, brave sweetness of time where someone slept with a sprig beneath their pillow. The brother or sister hospitaller is moving before you are, kind in that efficient way that does not spoil kindness by making it fussed over. A broom hushes the floor, a ladle answers a pot. The door is bar lifted with a sound like a wooden amen. You sit, and everything you repaired at midnight introduces itself again, politely and painfully. Boots, right. First your hands, because they were brave for your feet yesterday and will need reminding. You flex fingers. You find the bandage roll, linen soft with carry, and clean with the best intentions of vinegar. You unwind the gauze and the night's blister thread. Check that the knots have not tightened into mischief. Coax them free if they have. The salve pig fat with a rumor of sage has done its small work. The skin looks less like a map of sorrow and more like a plan for travel. You paint a thinner layer than last night. Today you walk, and too much mercy will betray you into sliding. A woman across from you demonstrates a heel wrap she swears by. A figure 8 that hugs rather than strangles. A young man copies her with the seriousness people reserve for sacraments and knots. Someone's rosary taps wood in a beat that makes the room feel together. The dog does a long stretch, front paws out, rump up, and yawns so widely the dormitory seems briefly inside his mouth. Then, breakfast appears the way simple things often do in holy houses. Without drama, exactly enough. The crusts are honest. Yesterday's bread shaped by fire and resolve set beside a bowl of olives that glisten like small verdicts. There's a jug of watered wine, thin but friendly, poured into cups that remember the heat of last night's hands. No one says feast, but the steam from the bread crust and the salt from the olives remind every tongue what gratitude tastes like. You take a bite and your jaw complains and then agrees. Even fatigue will submit to a little oil and salt. Conversation is low, like a stream running under roots. The blessing for the way comes as the bell changes its mind about which hour it island. You stand with the others, some bareheaded, some cowled, one or two still lacing boots because grace does not always find you punctual, and the hospitaller raises a hand. Dominus vobiscum. A dozen ankles answer. Et cum spiritu tuo, mostly with knees. A short prayer, St. James, invoked by name. God asked to watch the road because humans have tried and found the job too large. And emotion, like a wave, passes through the room as people cross themselves and turn to their packs. The amen hangs in the air like a thread of smoke, and then folds itself into the day. Now the packing rituals. All the pilgrim choreography learned by repetition and small disasters. The pouch is checked, and then checked again. Coin not where a thief's hand would hope to find it. Token badge pinned, where a friendly eye will know your claim. The gourd on its cord gets a trial swing water inside, slaps once. Like a fish consenting to be carried, you tug your cloak straight. Flick a crumb from the hood. Roll it down until it will not puff itself into a sail at the first hill. Your shell, the scallop that says who you are and where you're going, gets smoothed and straightened with the care of a saint's relic. Thread retied, edge wiped, pride tucked under humility, then worn plainly over the breast so the world can see your intention before it sees your face. Boots next. Lacing is a prayer in loops. Over-under becomes a spell against friction. You feel for the changes midnight taught, one eyelet skipped where the tendon complained. a knot moved higher so it will not pressure the bone with delusions of nobility. Every pilgrim becomes a cobbler at dawn. Straps pulled, buckles argued with and persuaded. A last palm across the heel to make sure no seam plans treachery. Around you, bits of home go into packs. A sliver of soap, a needle, a twist of salt, a corner of cheese promised last night and not yet betrayed, a letter folded until it resembles a secret. Someone arranges a saint's token in the top flap, where it will be first to see the day. Someone else saves a small olive stone to hold in the pocket for the first steep hill. A reminder that even hard things are food if you can swallow them. You rise with the collective groan of wood and tendon and humor. Then there is that moment all pilgrims recognize, private and public at once. When the first step hurts the loudest, it is not a scream. It is the body clearing its throat to address the assembly. I object. You answer like a seasoned parliamentarian. Noted. Then you take a second step before your bones can filibuster. By the third, the body realizes it is outvoted. By the fifth, it remembers that motion is its oldest language. Outside the threshold, the day has not committed to color. Damp stones reflect a sky that's more suggestion than fact. The yard smells of animals reconsidering their plans. A cart creaks oxen are morning philosophers. They do not rush their conclusions. The gate is a jaw that opens, and the road shows its teeth and smiles anyway. The line forms not by command, but by kinship. Tall and small, young and used to it, penitents and merchants, and that soldier with the saint's medal wired to his staff. Each person's staff taps a personal tempo on stone, but together it becomes the road's metronome. A hand lifts in farewell to the hospitaller, who answers with a blessing that looks like wiping sleep from the air. The last thanks are murmured, the last poultice checked, the last wink from the dog accepted like a coin that cannot be spent but makes you feel rich. You look for waymarks because that is what human eyes do when they are asked to walk toward promise. The small cross, half hidden in ivy on a garden wall. The cairn at the bend where more stones tell the next feet, this is ours too. The painted shell on weathered plaster, faded but stubborn. A finger carved in wood that points west, and has been pointing so long it believes pointing is prayer. A woman ahead of you touches each sign as if checking a child's brow for fever. At the first fork, a man with an accent like hills gestures left with his chin. He has walked before or looks like it, and in pilgrim mathematics those are functionally the same. The road gathers you, your pack's familiar pull, the rub of cloak edge against wrist, the clack of ferrule on stone. Breath becomes something you can hear and count. The person ahead becomes a metronome of shoulders. You measure distance in songs long enough to be interrupted by a hill, in prayers that do not require doctrine so much as persistence. In the steady drip of thought down into quiet. Behind, the hospitalia shrinks to a roofline, and then to a story you will tell someone tonight. There was a basin, and someone had time. Ahead, the world lifts up more backs moving west. A procession of spines and shells and the stubborn architecture of hope. The path tilts. The day brightens from pewter to tin to poor silver, which is still silver, which is still light. Birds start to argue about nothing important. You bless them for their frivolity. One hill, later two. The units of pilgrimage are famously elastic. You find bread again, but this time in the mouth of the road itself. A woman has set a basket on a stoop with a chalk mark. Take one, traveler, and a small jar of oil sitting like a sundae. You obey not because you are hungry, you are, but because the gesture completes a sentence the world started saying at the door. Go on. Your feet file a mid-morning addendumless complaint now, more commentary, and your knees, fluent in Latin and compromise, adversarially align. You smile because this is the part where your body admits it missed you all along, that all you had to do was begin again for the 5,000th time. A market cart passes the other way, rooster lashed to its rail like a siren. The driver tips his hat at the shells, and you feel how a symbol can be a passport without paper. A child runs alongside, pretending his stick is a pilgrim's staff, and the ditch a dragon slain. You tell him saints favor imagination. He returns to his mother with dignity normally reserved for magistrates. Mid-morning, the wind begins to invent weather. A low drizzle practices on your hood, and the shell on your breast answers with a soft tapping like a quiet knock. Are you awake? Yes. Are you going? Yes. Do you know where? Not entirely, and that is also yes. The path narrows to pass between a stone wall and a hedge. The olive pits in your pocket clack like friendly bones. When fatigue rummages in your pack looking for your will, the group performs its ancient magic. Someone begins a psalm in a voice that is mostly road dust. Another answers with harmony a third too low and twice as brave. The rhythm of staves keeps time. A line of Latin surfaces, beati qui, ambulant blessed, are those who walk. And even if Scripture had meant something else, the road steals it for its own. A milestone appears, carved face, eaten by rain, but the number's still legible if you squint and choose hope over accuracy. You touch it as if it can feel you back. You adjust the strap that always insists on mischief. A stranger offers to help, because pilgrims do. And you nod, because pilgrims let them. The sun tries twice and succeeds once. Shadows reappear like old acquaintances who forgot your name but remember your face. Heat lifts the smell of damp wool into something like gratitude. The olive you saved for this moment is salt and mercy. A sparrow keeps pace on the wall, flicking its tail like a metronome of small courage. Someone laughs at nothing because laughter is a spice, and soup needs it. You do not have coffee. You have pulse and bread, and the ridiculous perseverance of 2 legs attached to a promise. When the road blesses you with a flat stretch, you feel nearly wealthy. When it reminds you of its hills, you pay in breath, and pay gladly. There is, at last, the joke the morning has been setting up since the bell and the rooster made their duet. Coffee? No. But our special today is courage on an empty stomach. Everyone orders it. Refills are free. Side effects include walking further than you feared and exactly as far as you hoped. Ask 100 pilgrims why they walk, and you'll get 100 answers, each one correct, each one incomplete, without the rest. Motives braid like the cords on a staff. Penance and healing. Vows fulfilled and exile softened. Curiosity that refuses to sit still. A need for community that ordinary life could not supply. And hope. Always hope. Because hope is the only cargo that gets lighter the farther you carry it. For some, the road is penance measured not in Hail Marys but in miles. They have a wrong they cannot repair with coin. A word they cannot unsay. A grief that keeps arriving uninvited. The Camino offers a grammar for sorrow. Step, step, breathe. Confession rendered in dirt and distance. Their prayers are blisters that the body writes for the soul when the tongue runs out of language. Each evening, as the boots come off, they examine their contrition stitched into cracked heels and say, with a wince, Amen. For others, walking is healing where medicine has nothing left to prescribe. A child buried too early, a winter of hunger, a summer of war. The road teaches a strange surgery motion, as suture, sunrise as antiseptic, laughter as stitch. The pilgrim learns to distribute pain across time and landscape until it is no longer a spike, but a hum they can live with. Even miracle seekers know that miracles tend to have calluses. Healed does not always mean cured. It often means carried differently. Then there are vows, some promised in foxhole whispers or sickbed bargaining, others inherited from a grandmother who never traveled farther than market day but dreamed westward whenever the church bells were soft. Vows can be elegant or clumsy. The road honors both. Tie one to your staff, speak it once, and the Camino will remember it even when you forget. Exile finds its way here too. Not always the grand kind with edicts and banners. Often smaller, quieter. A guild quarrel gone bad. A love that collapsed like a badly built roof. A reputation that grew mold in the corner of a town square. The road is generous to the misfit. It asks only that you move. With each day, exile becomes pilgrimage. And by the time you reach the next milepost, the difference is not legal, but liturgical. And yes, plain curiosity. The stubborn human itch to see what's around the hill, to learn if a different river sounds different, to test whether the sun sets with the same bell note in another town. Curiosity disguises itself as piety when necessary, and nobody minds. God, if paying attention, likely approves of either costume. But the secret gravity that keeps feet going is belonging. The brotherhood and sisterhood of the shell forms a moving parish without walls, with a liturgy made of shared bread, and the mutual manipulation of knots in hard-to-reach places. Strangers become recognizable long before they become known. The woman with the blue thread on her gourd, the man who limps until the second hill, the widow who hums the same psalm at nearly the same pace as your staff. A day or two with such people, and your pronouns shift. You stop saying I and start saying we, without noticing the liturgical moment of conversion. The psychology of motion does its work. Pain becomes prayer because repetition sanctifies anything endured with attention. A milepost becomes a bead on a rosary. The distance between villages becomes a decade of patience. You count not just kilometers but kindnesses. The aproned woman who added an extra ladle of stew. The boy who pressed a pear into your palm and fled before thanks could make him shy. The old man who drew a map in dust with his cane and then, for good measure, walked the first 100 paces with you. These tally marks of mercy add up to something sturdier than doctrine, trust. Stories travel faster than boots. Each night, the dorm fills with miracle rumors like sparks. A storm that parted its own curtains. A wolf that reconsidered theology and left the flock alone. A creditor forgiven after a dream with good lighting. You don't have to believe all of them. The Camino does not demand credulity. It asks only that you keep the stories company while they walk beside you. In the quiet part of the afternoon, when the sun is a patient hammer on your shoulders, you might discover that your doubt and your faith are neighbors, borrowing salt and gossip across a shared fence. By midday, the mind enters its cleaner weather. Thoughts unspool behind you like thread that no longer needs to be knotted around the same nail. Griefs line up for roll call, and you realize some have failed to report for duty. Resentments try to keep pace and fall behind. A tune you haven't heard in years walks out of an alley in your childhood and strolls beside you until the hill takes the breath you were saving for singing. Belonging sharpens again each evening, bowls passed, the simple arithmetic of dividing bread by the number of hands, water poured until the jug says enough, jokes translated into gestures when language stumbles. Someone mends a strap. Someone else tells the story about St. James scolding the sea as if it were a donkey. Laughter grafts people together. If the day took something from you, the table usually returns part of it with interest. And then there is the arrival imagined. The long-distance thunder you feel before you hear. The cathedral rising by rumor in the mind's weather. You rehearse the embrace at the Apostles' Shrine, the way a child rehearses knocking on a friend's door. Awkward, eager, already warmed by hospitality, not yet given. You picture the square. The musicians whose songs sound like the pavement has learned to breathe. The Botafumeiro swinging like a yes so big it requires rope and hands and choreography. You imagine the story you will carry home. Not the postcard story, but the one your neighbors will pull from you at market, at matins, while the kettle boils. About the man who taught you a knot. About the hill that tried to change your mind. About the day the sky misunderstood the forecast and was kind. You keep walking because every step converts distance into meaning and returns it to you as courage. Because the road keeps vouching for you. See? You kept a promise for another 5 miles. Because the river you followed yesterday is somewhere to your left, still muttering the same grievances, and you feel companioned by its persistence. Because the shell on your chest catches the morning and rings with a soft, private bell that says, forward. And because, frankly, stopping hurts too. And at least motion gives the ache somewhere to be. What survives is easy to spot, even through breathable fabric and better deodorant. The shell still hangs from Pax Plastic or Mother of Pearl, cheap tin or carved wood announcing a lineage older than any brand. Stamps still thump into credenziales. A passport that collects ink like a child, collects pebbles, parish crests, cafe scribbles, municipal seals. All of it proof that you were a rumor made flesh in a long ribbon of towns. There are still communal dinners, equal parts, carbohydrate and congregation, where conversations hopscotch across languages and someone uncorks a bottle that tastes like sun stored for a rainy day. And there is still the soft hush of an albergue that lights out a mutual agreement that sleep, however imperfect, is communal property. Continuities and comforts mingle without apology. Socks are better, boots kinder, roads safer, signage loud enough to cheer the timid. The rain jacket weighs less than your grandmother's apron and works harder. Apps will tell you how far to the next bed, though the oldest app remains the person walking toward you who says with their hands 2 hills and a left at the oak. And yet the sky has kept its contract same dome, same arguments with clouds, same extravagant sunsets that make even the skeptical consider a quick thank you. The night's lesson has shifted venue more than substance. Where shared palates once forced proximity, shared tables now invite it. People still pass bread in stories. The miracle is still with each other, especially on days when the weather was ambitious and your morale was not. The bunk above you still belongs to someone who snores like a medieval organ. But the walls are better, the laundry routine more forgiving, and the chamber pot a museum piece where it belongs. One pilgrim night distills the Camino the way a good broth distills a kitchen. Fragile bodies, stubborn hope, and a road braided from prayer and dust. You arrive hungry for rest and leave hungry for tomorrow. Between the basin and the bell, you discover that ordinary kindness is a sacrament, that bread is a language with no accent, and that courage often looks like putting your sore foot down again, gently, then firmly, then with a little laugh because you know it will complain and you're going anyway. Set against that, the modern world feels like science fiction. Privacy behind curtains that close, hygiene with hot water on command, tech that can locate a bed and phone a friend at once. These are luxuries our predecessors would have called miracles and then sung about for a century. Yet the heart of the thing has refused to modernize. You still look for waymarks, still pace your thoughts to the rhythm of your own staff, still discover that strangers are simply unintroduced allies. The Camino keeps its ancient bargain. Walk and be changed. By weather, by welcome, by the patient arithmetic of distance. So when the dawn bell feels early and your feet rehearse their list of grievances, remember the river of souls, ahead and behind, still moving. Know that in barns and hostels, in sleek albergues and stubborn stone refuges, countless people have stood exactly where you stand, wrapped their cloaks or zipped their jackets, and taken the next step. You are not a dot on a map. You're a syllable in a sentence the road has been saying for 1,000 years. And if tonight you find your bunk a little lumpy and your neighbor's playlist a little enthusiastic, permit yourself a smile and this small, undramatic Thanksgiving. At least no one is emptying a night pot out the window. Probably